Thank you to our board leadership. I'll take just a brief note of personal privilege to say my gratitude to this board. This week I was supposed to be at a ministers conference in California, but with everything locally and nationally, I'm not. So I'm online with hundreds of UU ministers from across the country for most of the day this week. Throughout the week, and I can express my gratitude for this congregation and its leadership, knowing that there are many different experiences across our country of how congregations are faring or not so well in some cases, but I'm grateful for this community and all that our leadership is doing to hold us together well and strong, and in vibrant, active ways. So my gratitude to the board, and with that, I'll turn it over to President Ann Hutton.
Thanks, Luke. And like Reverend Luke, I'll offer a special welcome to this Wednesday forum and an update from your board. When we had the last board update a year ago, I certainly did not think that we would still be gathering remotely. So I thank you for your understanding and your patience as we all in our city and our country and worldwide continue to navigate these very unusual times. As you will hear tonight, while we may still be physically apart and missing each other, the work of the church, the work of our congregation has continued despite all of these COVID obstacles. So as Luke mentioned, we have board members reporting on our goals that we set last summer. There's 4 goals. Each board member will review the goal language and then give a brief update on some of the activities that either board members have personally been involved with or that members of the congregation have been working on during the last few months. So as Luke, do you want to share your screen? Because our chalice lighting words are on the second slide. So I thought it was appropriate. These words are actually at the end of a prayer written by Reverend Dillman Baker Sorrells, our Minister Emeritus, and they sort of speak to my heart and where we are at this moment in time. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be together as a community, to remember the past, to plan our future, to be alive in our present. And I do have a chalice that I will light, and certainly if any of you have a chalice nearby or a candle, even one virtually, I encourage you to light one as well. At this point, I'll turn it over to Joe Lobo and goal 1.
Great. Welcome everyone. Happy Groundhog Day. So goal 1 was to offer opportunities for connection and spirituality, spiritual growth, spiritual care as we gather within the lingering pandemic environment. Little did we know how much the pandemic would be lingering. So task 1, continue and as possible expand options for vibrant multi-platform congregational life and engagement in the church. Task 2, monitor practices and advice from religious and health sources, adapting our pandemic congregational guidelines as needed. And task 3, communicate updated plans for engagement in public services and events. And so the next slide will kind of review some of these. Obviously, I think it's been pretty obvious, we've integrated the live stream and in-person services. Our staff has done an amazing job with this, and Luke should be commended for how much we've been able to do. We have installed additional video technology. We outlaid some money to upgrade our video and computer technology within the sanctuary to be able to live stream and enhance our online viewing. And little did we know, again, how much we'd be having to continue with that. We have supported healthy outdoor fellowship activities, knowing that outdoor activities are safer in the current environment. A lot of online community events and communicating our reopening strategy as well. As you know, we've had incredible fellowship committee activity, and I don't have to say that just because the fellowship chair is somewhere nearby here. But a lot of outdoor things, including, and I'm supposed to tell you this, sledding on Saturday coming up, and cross-country skiing and snowshoeing in a week and a half. So keep those on your calendar. But we had a 12th night bonfire, a lot of online activities. We're having UU's Got Talent coming up on March 5th. So that's the end of my advertising. In terms of how we've done the medical and COVID response, I've been part of that regathering team with Reverend Luke, and Erica Beecher is on it. Ann helps us with that. I wanted to share just a few of the resources that we monitor closely. And these are just a few, and Luke can tell you about this. I send him emails, he sends me emails. We now have, you know, pretty much our degrees in epidemiology and public health online now. But the covidactnow.org site, if you haven't seen that, that's a good one. We monitor the cases per 100,000 people here in Rochester, and the test positivity rate and the infection rate. These, we have numbers that we kind of look at for these. I can tell you right now, they're still like way off the chart, but supposedly will be coming down shortly. But these are some of the actual numbers we look at. The New York Times has been a great resource, a blog called the Your Local Epidemiologist blog by a woman named Caitlin Yedalina. We get updates from Mayo, the Minnesota Department of Health. So a lot of information that we've been kind of going through to be sure we're doing the right thing for our community, our church community, ourselves, our staff, as well as our local community. Also, another thing that we did was survey the congregation and use that data to help guide our comfort levels. That's where we found out a vast majority, if not 100% of our congregation is vaccinated. And then we have been providing periodic updates, including one just yesterday, I think came in your e-news or your email boxes to our members and friends. So I know time is limited, so that's, I just wanted to give you an overview of things, and I'll be available for questions afterwards. So.
Goal 2 and shared ministry will be discussed by Kim Reed.
Oops, I was muted. I was going on, and now I'm really here. So I've had lots of experience with this over the distance learning of late. So, but anyway, shared ministry teams are now in their second year of pandemic style meetings. We haven't had the opportunity for the shared ministry teams to work together in leadership for the church when we are all together. And so that has been a really interesting start to this shared ministry experience. But this fall, the shared ministry governance team asked each team to reflect on what was going well in their area, what questions or concerns they still had. And overall, team's consensus were that they were functioning well, and things were really going smoothly. The team members who are now on shared ministry teams are in their second year as team members. So it's time to think, we really need to think about the number of team members and the length of each team member's term that would be ideal. So we asked the teams to think about that. Overall, the teams felt that a 2 to 3 year term renewable once would work really well, and staggering the terms would be important to have that continuity. And so we've been having conversations with the shared ministry team about the best way to recruit congregational representatives for the shared ministry teams. And some of the things that were brought up by the teams were they might have specific strengths or skill sets that that team needs in thinking about who would make a good team member. For example, on faith development, it's really most helpful to have a representative, maybe who's a parent of a younger child, one who's a parent of a youth, someone who can represent the adult faith development. So you want each team to be able to identify what their needs are. It was suggested that we could then share those needs out with the congregation as a whole, survey congregants about their interest in being on a team, or let people self-nominate for consideration as team members. Maybe have the nominating committee recruit team members, have teams identify possible team members. So that's where the shared ministry process is right now. We're really beginning to think about how do we best identify and nominate those shared ministry team members so that each shared ministry team continues to be well functioning. So they'll be discussing that at their winter meetings. One of our goals was communication with the congregation. Minutes and links for future meetings can be found on the church governance page. In talking about this at the last board meeting, it felt like it sometimes was a little bit hard to figure out when a shared ministry team was going to meet next, because the meetings have been a little bit random. So the board has determined it would be helpful for everyone if in the fall we set up a meeting calendar for the year, so everybody can know when all the meetings are for the board or shared ministry teams, in case you'd like to attend or participate and observe that way. Task 2, we were talking about undertaking the creation of a congregational covenant with the assistance from regional staff. And a congregational covenant, according to UUA, can be a written agreement among individual community members promising to behave in certain ways, talk about how we engage in mutual promises with the spirit and the other people in our community, and how we work together. So Luke had contacted Reverend Sharon Dittmar of Mid-America Regional Staff as a resource to help us. But the board has come to the decision that it might be best to wait until we all are back in person before we begin this process, because it won't be a quick process. We need to have opportunities to really be in conversation with each other as we develop our own congregational covenant that fits our congregation the best. The tasks 3 and 4, we're looking at reviewing bylaws and amendments or policies and procedures in relation to shared ministry. But given that the church life hasn't returned yet to pre-pandemic levels, and we haven't quite fully fleshed out the transition of how it's best for us to have terms for shared ministry members and nominations, and we're working on that right now. It was decided maybe we should revise these once those questions are answered and the shared ministry governance experience has had a chance to function in the in-person culture when we're all back together. So I think that hits all my points on this slide.
So I'm going to talk about goal 3, strive to create systemic change for justice within our congregation and community. And we had 2 goals with these. One is to work collaboratively and continue to deepen the congregational understanding of justice issues. And the second task was to finalize the sex offender risk reduction policy. You can go to the next slide, which has sort of our bullet points. The one thing we haven't done much on was the sex offender risk reduction policy. We have, like so many other things, decided to postpone a final decision about that until after the general regathering, so we can, have a in-person conversation about that before we make a final decision one way or the other. But there have been lots of other things with our other goal that we've continued to do. And these are just a few of them. I will say that I'm very grateful and humbled to be part of a community where there's so many members are doing really great works in the community. So I'm not covering all of them in this presentation, but there's a lot going on. So we've co-hosted forums and informational gatherings with Isaiah, who's a partner of ours. We are collaborating with the Afghan Refugee Resettlement Program. So there's several of us who've been helping support an Afghani family's transition to the US, which is been really great. We've continued a monthly collaboration with a community organization. So every month we highlight a community organization, and that's where our shared plate goes to. Often, I think there's always been a Wednesday forum associated with them. And just one of the community partners, for example, this month is Smiled, and your weekly forum next Wednesday is the Smiled. Smiled is the Southern Minnesota Interfaith Immigrant Legal Defense Fund, and they're doing next week's forum, just FYI. We also had a social justice fair when we gathered in person at the History Center this fall when the weather was still nice, to highlight all of the things that were happening in the church. And then the Wide Welcoming team received a renewal of welcoming congregation status, which is actually really great. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy to apply for that. And so having that status is great. And they also hosted a transgender inclusion course, and I'm just going to give a little plug. That was incredible. And if anybody hasn't done it and the opportunity comes up again, I highly recommend taking that transgender inclusion course, which covers way more ground than just transgender inclusion, but inclusion in a lot of different ways. So I think I'll stop there and turn it over, but lots of good works going on with respect to social justice.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to tackle goal 4. I'm Walt Rothwell. I'm the newest face to the board, and I am now part of the Building Our Future Beyond Ourselves team. And the goal 4 was to continue the activities relating to that team. I'm going to start with task 4, the report from our UUA consultant that was provided to us in May of last year. From my vantage point, we had an excellent experience with her engagement and her analysis of where things stand with the congregation and with the current property. She included a sample timeline in her report, which hasn't been possible because of all the pandemic restrictions. And so we're not necessarily following the sequence that she had outlined, and we have multiple things happening somewhat simultaneously. There have been ongoing conversations with architects and realtors, and that focuses right now primarily on what improvements are possible and recommended for the current building. There are meetings scheduled and conversations with Rochester Public Utilities about power lines going on so that we can bring back an update with facts and figures for the congregation to consider relating to that. This is our first information sharing sessions of the year, but it's certainly not the last. We'll be continuing to expand the conversation, and we very much look forward to all being in the building together as we safely can to have that experience again and talk with each other again. And then the last I'll mention is task number 2. The Heritage Preservation Commission is a city organization that designates properties around the city as historic and deserving preservation. We apparently in 2014, our church property was placed on that list of potential sites. And so that's a conversation we have to have with them, whether we decide to stay on the current property or not. The decision of the commission could influence our options, either in terms of revising the current building or in terms of selling the property. So it's an important issue regardless. And then you can move on to the next slide. Thank you. So we did conduct walking tours in the fall of the new property, and we've tried to give a good deal of information about the gift property so that once a decision is made by the congregation in terms of stay or go, then if the decision is to go, we can proceed to the next step. So hopefully there's a good deal of familiarity among congregants about what that option entails. We're continuing to work with architects, as I mentioned, and with the commission. RASA is the Rochester Academy Rochester Arts and Science Academy, which is a potential lessor of the building, so that they could potentially use that for educational purposes while we're in the building.
Well,
Sorry.
can I interrupt at that point? We just heard today from them. We had been in conversation with them about our needs and their needs and different uses of the space. And there had been a lot of concern that maybe our space wasn't quite big enough to meet their needs. And so we did hear from them today that they have decided to go with another building or rent somewhere else that would provide them some more space. So that is no longer on the table, but I think it's opened up some interesting conversations about our building and the opportunity to build partnerships with other groups in using our building more fully through the week. So I'll back out now.
Well, I want to personally thank Kim and Amy for all the time and expertise they brought to those conversations. It was really very involved. The last thing I'll mention is regarding the potential property donation that the individuals who have offered that generous gift have preferred to remain anonymous, and we're honoring their request.
So the financial update we have for today is good. It basically goes through year end of 2021. The reason being is we just wrapped up January 2 days ago, and we don't have those reports yet. But at the end of the year, total pledges were running ahead of our expectations. What really kept that there was all of the year end donations that people did to get their pledges in, I assume for tax reasons. We, as all of you are fully aware, we've had a reduction in the number of in-person gatherings and what we can do when we are in person. That's kept a lot of the day-to-day expenses down. As we do more on Zoom. If you've been reading the weekly e-news, you've seen that we're going to start easing back into in-person gatherings later this month. So my anticipation is a little bit higher expenses as we move forward, as long as the pandemic supports that and we continue doing that. But I believe right now the income minus expenses that we've incurred so far has helped put us in a really nice position for the rest of this fiscal year. As you all are aware, the auction that we normally do in the fall was postponed till spring, hoping that we were farther along in the pandemic and we could have an in-person. Fingers crossed. If things continue to decrease in the community as far as the rate of infection goes, we should be able to do that. The fallback is still to do the auction, but if it doesn't support face-to-face, we'll go back to an online auction like we did last year. And the last thing on the financial side, a personal thanks to everybody for their continued generosity. It really helps put the church in a good financial position and allows us to be ready to pounce, if you will, when the opportunity arises to do things face to face.
Well, thanks to the board members for being so succinct and getting us to 7 o'clock with lots of times for questions or suggestions. So this is really the time for anyone who is attending and participating in this forum to either write your questions in the chat and Luke will convey them to the board members, or simply unmute yourself and let us know that you would like to speak. Sort of think about it as that open discussion in the hearth room when we're still at home.
And there was a question of who are the board members? So if you maybe want to list all the board members, both here and distant.
Sure. So I'm serving as president this year. In my second year, Kim Reed is vice president, and also in her second year of vice president. Greg Turasek, who is, I believe, visiting grandchildren this week. So he's out having much more fun than being at a board meeting, is secretary. And then Rob, as you figured out, is treasurer with a financial report. Members at large are Joe Lobo, Walt Rothwell, Molly Dingle, and Brianna Burke. So, and one of the beauties of generally speaking in these COVID times, even when people have been far away and distant, we've had great attendance at board meetings. And I have to say that as a board president, this is, as Luke mentioned, a hardworking board. It's usually more a situation of in asking for assistance, we have more people volunteering sometimes than we even need. So kudos to the board members for just how well they show up and how hard they work.
There was a question about the epidemiology blog that Joe mentioned. So as Joe said, there's several good sources out there, but one that we've regularly read is your local epidemiologist, which is Dr. Caitlin Tedalina. I forget where exactly she's from, Joe, maybe you remember, but Texas, yep. And she's been on several blogs and special COVID shows, I guess is a thing now, different panels and that sort of stuff. So that's one among some others. So there's a link to that if you're interested. This is probably a question for Rob. What have been the major expenses so far in this fiscal year besides staff salaries?
With the pandemic and all the Zoom meetings, the largest portion of expenses so far have been staff salaries. The day-to-day stuff like keeping the building heated and electricity and stuff, we still have to keep those things going because some of the staff do work from the office. So, those things aren't changing. But when you're not doing stuff in person, you don't have expenses for kitchen, and cleaning doesn't take quite as much and things like that. So there really hasn't been much major other than the salaries. We did spend a bit of money on a video switcher for the live streaming. One of the things that we realized with the live streaming is it was hard to see anything projected on the screen at the same time because we only have one camera. And so we got a switcher to allow us to switch between the camera view and the computer view. That was only a couple grand though. It was not outrageous. So primarily the big expenses have been salaries and benefits as kind of a lump of insurance, retirement, all that stuff.
I think I see Margot unmuted and then Benita. Feel free to unmute or, yeah. Margot, if you want to go.
So this is nitpicking, Rob, but with the reduced use of the building, what happens, like, garbage pickup and snow removal? And speaking of reduced use of the building, well, we're also down rental income we might get from other groups, outside groups renting the building, but maybe that's just been negligible in past years. I don't know.
The rental income is not a huge part of our budget. So far, our donations from individuals have been enough that it really isn't, the loss of rental income is not showing up as a big blip on the radar, if you will. We still have snow removal. As you're probably aware, living in Minnesota, if you don't remove the snow shortly after it comes, it packs itself down and it makes it really hard to get it up the next time. And so we stay on top of that. Garbage, unfortunately, as I think Bill Thompson can attest, that is an ongoing struggle. They charge you the same regardless of how often or how much they pick up. And we've tried to get them to cut down to once a month, especially in these pandemic times, but the contract is a contract and they come when they come. So that's a fixed expense, if you will. I think the mow and snow this year switched to a per time basis. So we get charged when they come. Previous years, it was a flat fee for the entire season. So snow was like August or October 31st or November 1st to like April 1st was a flat fee, and they would come anytime. This year, I believe we switched to whenever they come and there's a fee, because it was so hit and miss. So those things have been addressed. But like I said, garbage is, they're charging us regardless. So they come weekly. We tried to get them to reduce the frequency, but it doesn't reduce the cost.
Thanks.
What, Benita?
Yeah, Benita, do you have a
Can
question?
you hear me?
Mhm.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, back on the old preservation business. That would affect if the building is still on the preservation list. That means that that anybody is limited on what they can do for changes. And does it also mean that if a future buyer far time away wanted to buy the dirt, they could not tear down the building and make something else on that dirt?
Benita, this is Walt. That's my understanding, that there are actually two levels of their ruling on the property. And if the property remains at either of those levels, then they would have to approve any future demolition of the building. So that's one of the issues that we'll be actively discussing with them. It's less clear to me right now how it would interfere with renovation or expansion of the building, but I do believe they'd have to sign off, at least in principle, on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Benita. Thanks, Walt. Molly, I sent you, someone had a question for you about Catholic Charities, and if you could say any more about the refugee resettlement program or donations needed. I think there was something in the e-news today about that too. Do you have other things you can share about that?
Yeah, and I wonder what the question is. There has been a group that started working on helping out with a refugee family, and I'm a lot less knowledgeable about that. And then there's been a group of us who have been working to support an Afghan family that is here as well. And I think does Julie happen to be on? I think that we're pretty good, or pretty good with donations in terms of for the Afghan family. I think we've got most of the things that we needed for them. And then I don't know if anyone else knows about there's been another refugee family that some people were working on. Sorry, I'm a little.
I see Julie there. Julie, if you want to respond to that, and I can speak more broadly to an asylum family and then the larger question.
So,
Julie.
the thing in the e-news today was, they are going to be actually 12 more families coming. We have 13 Afghan families. So, one arrived today, yeah, so, the big, they furnish these, for 13 people apartments, and one from Syria too. So like their supply of furniture and stuff is, exhausted. So that's why they put out a big plea now. Our family that we're working with is coming along fine, and they are pretty much set. I know in the spring we'd like bicycles if anybody has bicycles for a 5-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So there are still things. And yeah, Luke, you can talk about the asylum.
Great, thanks, Julie. Yeah, so see the e-news for continual updates, as there may certainly be more needs there. And there was a group of folks through the church who was also working with an asylum-seeking family that has, not through any formal organization, but kind of a group of UUs was wanting to support a family. So they've been in touch now with the social justice team a little bit to figure out some ongoing support as well, maybe primarily financial. I think it's a little different program there. So that's still in process of figuring out what the needs are. I will say the amount of energy and time that folks have put into both the refugee resettlement program through Catholic Charities and then this newer asylum family as well. A lot of expertise and navigation and details and training and many hours, but such generosity by many folks within the church, as well as other folks beyond our walls, which is a beautiful thing to partner with beyond our walls. So I've been grateful in this time of distance of how active folks have continued to be in the community, and proud about that work and people's willingness. Yeah, Julie.
So just one other thing is that, so this Afghan family is not a refugee family. So these are, the Afghans that, had to be evacuated, got evacuated out. They are actually parolees, and they have to apply for asylum. Right now, if they don't get that, or if the legislature doesn't pass the Afghan Resettlement Act, I believe it's called, they will be forced out of our country in 2 years. So you need to contact Hagedorn and Cedar Smith and Amy Klobuchar, and anybody else in other states get that. I mean, that would just be a real crime. They put them through enough, and then if we kick them out, they have applied for asylum, but we know how the asylum system is going too. So the background.
Right. Thanks, Julie. Bonita, did you have a follow-up or question?
So for the details of, if we're going to fuss at policymakers, is there a way for us to get 2 or 3 talking points that we are consistently delivering that same message from different parts of the constituents of we're fussing, and we're saying the same things that are important to us from a diverse area? How can I find that?
Well, yeah, I don't know, Belinda, I can work on that. But again, just please from your heart. I mean, you've all watched these, what's happened with the Afghan country, the Afghan, families, and to welcome them. It's great to, to say, and help them out now, which they are getting, government, support. But then to, possibly, be, tracking them down and send them to Canada, or I don't know where. Yeah, so I'll work on that, Benita, if you want something. I just.
So it's called the Afghan refugee something or other.
Yeah, Resettlement Act, I think. You're right. I should have better information. I just wrote to them and just said, this is, so important. We gotta, I think they'll know, but you're right, you should sound more intelligent than I do.
Especially with some of the policymakers who are confident that they know what they need to know already. And if there's not a tsunami of pestiferous emails plugging up their boxes and phone calls plugging up their voicemails and being pestiferous to their office staff, it's just another thing.
Yeah. Well, I'll get the exact act. There is an act, in Congress.
Thank you.
Walt Rothwell provided a couple links to look at that I just put in the chat for you there. Good idea, Benita. Thank you. And yeah, if we have any kind of updates or talking points for strategic work, we can certainly share those in the e-news as well. And social justice team can support that too. Thanks for the question. There's a couple links there to share. There's a question for Rob around total budget and percentage of expected income that I sent to Rob. I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, so just to level set everybody on a lot of these expenses and income things, the best we can do is take the budget divided by 12. So when an expense hits, we don't always know, but where we're sitting right now, we're 115% of budgeted income and 93% of budgeted expenses.
I had two things. At the beginning on the slide with Dillman's prayer, it says she's a minister emeritus. I believe it's a minister emerita. We fight it every time somebody becomes one. Somebody thinks they're all emeritus, and that's male, and Dillman is not male, she's female.
My apologies. Thank you, Marge. I love it when people are paying attention to the beauty of the English language. So my mistake on composing the slide.
Well, and I noticed it on the Sunday bulletin, and I was ready to mention it, and somebody changed it to emerita for Connie Schulke. The other thing is on the property in Northeast Rochester, that's a proposed gift. Sometimes it's referred to as proposed or projected. Other times they say someone will say new property. We haven't accepted the gift. We haven't decided to move. It's not new property.
So you're right. We need to be very much more mindful of our language. The board has been trying to be very careful to talk about it as the potential gift of property, because you're right. We have acknowledged the potential gift. We have not accepted the piece of property. We have steps that we want to go through first.
And we haven't decided to move.
And the very first, you're right, Marge, the very first decision that the board is hoping to consider is the idea of a stay or go vote. And that vote needs to be taken in light of our size and our mission and our location and a lot of variables, but not in that vote is not contingent upon any specific other place. It's a discussion about the philosophy of where best and how best do we serve our mission. So if any of you hear the language of new property mentally, add potential, because our donors have been very generous that if the decision is to go, then the decision has to be made as to where to go. And the donors have said that if that piece of property that they initially offered is not to our liking, is not our choice, they will make a financial contribution of a similar value. So in your minds, if the language isn't as precise as it should be, add those adjectives and know that nothing has been done until, or will be done until this very democratic congregation makes its decision.
Thank you.
But thank you for bringing that up, Marge, because I think sometimes, we get excited or the language just sort of slips by us.
Right.
There's a question for Rob. Rob, are you there?
I am.
Oh, hey.
628,000.
Oh, there was a
And
question of what the total budget for the fiscal year was.
Yeah, total budget 628, 660. But that includes the rollover funds that went into special funds. So the income itself, not including those rollover funds, was about $510,000.
Other questions, or as Anne's slide said, suggestions, comments, concerns, queries?
I've been wondering during the past 2 years if there's any deep cleaning of the church being done since we are absent, like vacuuming the upholstery on the sanctuary chairs or shampooing the carpets, those kinds of things. Thank you.
Good question. My guess is that I might be best to answer that since I'm in the building more than the board. Yes, a little bit here and there. I think especially in 2020, Darren was a little more, was probably a little more like, oh, this is temporary. He was motivated to do some quick, deep cleaning during those first several months. So he pulled up in the entryway, there's that kind of grate mat as you come in. He pulled that up and vacuumed and scrubbed underneath it. He's also done some other projects, carpet shampooing in the lobby, in the sanctuary, when we moved everything, all the chairs out of there, when we were just pre-recording everything. So some projects like that, light bulbs, checking batteries and all the detectors and thermostats and little things like that. But I don't know if he's vacuumed all the chairs in the sanctuary. So I'll ask him this week and say, Patty Trinka would like you to vacuum those chairs. But no, some of that has been happening. And I anticipate it might be a good communal activity when we continue to increase our in-person activities and abilities here in the building and on the property to do some of those communal care of our building and grounds. So good question, Patty. I think Rhonda, I see you raised your hand there. You want to unmute?
Yeah, I was wondering what the attendance has been on the online services, on the Sunday services. Could you hear me?
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Rhonda.
Okay.
I don't know if any board members want to respond. So I'll caveat it by saying that it's a little hard to track. In general, we're getting on an average week, the last several weeks, between probably about 150 or a little more views of the service within the week. And then that kind of builds over time. Some services over several weeks will have more, or special services like Christmas Eve or things will build over time. Again, those views are devices. And so we know that on some of those devices, like a home computer or TV or whatever, there may be multiple people watching or not. We can't track all of the analytics in terms of how long they're watching, if they fast forward through the sermon or whatever. So we don't know any of that stuff, but that's been pretty consistent. There were times early on when it was a little higher, and it stayed pretty consistent when we returned to an in-person option in the fall in October. So folks were, we'd have between 30 and 50 people per service in person for many of those weeks, and we'd have about 100 views on YouTube as well. I don't know how I'd have to ask Erica in the office how that counts, because they're posted both on our YouTube channel as well as that are uploaded onto our website. I don't know how those views are counted, or if they are, I don't know. I'm too much of a Luddite, I guess, for that. That's the end of my millennial knowledge on numbers for Sunday services, but we've been happy with that. And it feels like folks are feeling able to connect. Yeah. Others or board members that wanted to add anything?
Maybe I'll just say the deep cleaning we're going to blame on Patty, because for the regathering committee, there's been no documented cases of inanimate objects spreading COVID. So for general health and cleanliness, sure, clean them, get them clean, but not going to blame it on the regathering committee. That's all.
Yes, I'm very aware of that. It's just, I think over the years, I'm not sure the sanctuary chairs have ever been vacuumed. I mean, I don't know, but.
I'm with you. I'm just being.
I think they were in that big fall cleanup we had several years ago, when there was just a horde of people inside and outside, and we vacuumed the pits along the side where things fall down along the southwest and north walls. I think someone vacuumed all the chairs. And that's a lot of chairs. And that was in the days when a lot of the chairs were in the room. Now they're spread around or stacked.
Could I just ask, in anticipation of regathering, hopefully to insignificant numbers, I imagine there's still going to be mask restrictions for the foreseeable future. Do we have supplies on hand to offer masks to anyone who arrives, or are there any other supplies that we could anticipate?
I don't know, Joe, if you want to respond to that at all. I'm glad to share a quick.
Yeah, I think we've purchased some new masks. We have some N95s there. Yep, there are.
Along with half and half.
Enough half and half to float a battleship, it looks like. I'm not sure about the anti-COVID properties of half and half, but we could do a study. This is Rochester.
We could. We do, I'll say, in addition to what was pictured there, it's a great question, Walt. We, even before we suspended in person a couple weeks ago, we started ordering N95s and KN95s for both children and adults to be able to offer that for folks who didn't have access to their own or couldn't purchase their own or whatever. So currently we have a little stockpile in the office of probably 50 to 100 of each. And we're kind of waiting to see if we need to order more. And then of course, we have the surgical ones, lots of those as well. So yeah, that's something I think we'll continue to consider providing that for folks.
We still have the hand sanitizer things and the usual sorts of stuff.
Well, thank you. I would just encourage you, if there are surprise needs, please keep us posted in the e-news about donations that you might need to satisfy whatever need.
A small thing just in addition there too, somebody recently had some extra at-home tests that they didn't need and offered to donate them to the church because they were able to isolate at home if they needed to or whatever. And so that's one thing we encourage worship participants when we're back in person, especially if they're unmasked like myself, or if there's a singer or something, Sunday morning to take a rapid test. And of course, they're required to be fully vaccinated and boosted and masked any other time. But it's just an added layer of safety. So if you have random tests sitting around that you don't need from the government or whatever, send them our way. We'll stockpile them here too.
Don't let them expire.
I don't have any other questions here in the chat. Anne?
So I was just going to say, unless you had additional questions, and so we don't, I want to thank everyone for giving us an hour of your time tonight to hear what we've been doing and your good questions. Thanks to Luke for once again being our Minister of Tech. You may consider yourself a Luddite, but you master Zoom for sure. And certainly thanks to the hardworking board members for your everyday work as well as your presentation tonight. So thank you all, and stay warm and stay healthy.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.